Now to make this ginger mead, we're going to be using the following. I've got 1 pound of fresh ginger. I have 3 pounds of raw honey, 1/2 a cup of raisins, 1 orange. We'll be using 1/2 a lemon. I'll be using 1/2 a teaspoon of Red Star Premier Blanc wine yeast. And of course, if you don't have wine yeast, this still works. We'll need 1/2 a teaspoon of bread yeast, the original active dry kind, and that's going to act as our yeast nutrient for our wine yeast, or if we're not using wine yeast, then it will act as a yeast nutrient for our bread yeast. It would be helpful if you had a straining bag. It's not necessary, but it can be helpful. We should have on hand 1 gallon of clean filtered water. I'm going to be using an 8-quart pot with lid. We should have at least 2 carboys, 1 gallon or 4 liter, your choice. In my case, I'm going to start with a 4-liter carboy, and then when I do my first racking in several weeks into my secondary carboy, because of its smaller size, I don't have to lose as much headspace because of the least that will accumulate on the bottom of the primary carboy. We're going to need an airlock with bung. I find that using a number 6 bung usually works with 1 gallon and or 4-liter containers. It would be helpful, although not essential, to have a hydrometer with testing tube to help us determine what our final alcoholic content is going to be later on down the road. And using your appropriate food-grade sanitizer of choice, whether it's One Step or Star San, we want to make sure that all of our equipment has been properly cleaned and sanitized before we make our mead. Just follow the recommended directions for proper use. And that's what I'm going to be using to make this mead. Now, the first thing we need to do is that we need to peel our ginger. Using whatever method you prefer. I'm going to use the spoon method this time around. Just go ahead and slowly peel off the skin. You don't have to do it too hard. You find yourself getting into these little nooks and crannies. I mean, you can work your way around it, or you could just simply simplify life and get rid of the problem. Start off later. Oh, did I miss that spot? I did. There we go. And go ahead and proceed with the rest of it. All right, with that being done, let's go ahead and rinse these off and move on to the next step. Now then, let's go ahead and kind of thinly slice the ginger. Be very careful that you don't slice yourself. I mean, there's no predefined thickness, just what you would consider to be fairly thin. Take your time. There's no great rush. Deal with this one as a special case. There we go. All right. Let's just get those in a bowl temporarily just to get them out the way. These are good, so there we go. All right. We might just as well take this opportunity to go ahead and slice our oranges. Good enough. Let's go ahead and add these into the bowl. our ginger. Now the orange was cleaned, and in this case, with this particular orange, I had to do a little bit of scrubbing to make sure that it was all clean. But as far as our lemon is concerned, go ahead and slice that in half. And let's go ahead and squeeze that in a juicer. And for the moment, we're just going to set that aside. Because the next thing we need to do is that we want to give our raisins a rough chop. And you don't really need to have every single raisin chopped. Just enough where the raisins can release their flavor later on. And that's more than adequate. And we as well add that to the bowl. All right. Now, since I am using a straining bag, take advantage of that opportunity. Let's go ahead and put everything in the bag. And go ahead and tie the bag off. Again, if you don't have a straining bag, well, then you just don't have a straining bag. Don't worry about it. Press on. All right. It's now time to move on to the stove. Go ahead and start warming up our honey to help make it flow a little bit more easily out of the containers. All I did was just boil some water. Okay, now with our pot on the stove, we can go ahead and drop in our fruit and ginger. And let's take some of our water. Go ahead and pour that in. For roughly about half, a little bit more than half. Let's put our lid back on, and let's go ahead and turn on the heat to about medium. We'll let that come to a boil. All right, I've let this come to a boil for a few minutes, and it's now time to go ahead and add in half a teaspoon of our bread yeast. Now, there might be some out there who might be saying, well, aren't you killing the yeast if you do that? To which I answer, that is indeed the point. We want that yeast to be nice, good, and dead if it's going to act as a yeast nutrient to our other yeast that we're going to be using for fermentation. So let's go ahead and, now since I've got the opportunity, let's flip that over. Put the lid back on, and let's turn off the heat. And let the temperature come down just a little bit. All right, now that this is cooled just a little bit, I mean, yeah, it's still hot, but then there's no set temperature for it to cool down, at least not at this point. We're going to go ahead and add in our warmed up honey. I mean, while our mixture is still pretty warm, I am going to go back and see if I can rinse out as much of the honey that remained in the container as possible. This might not be my preferred method of getting it done, but as an example, It does work pretty well. And I'll just go ahead and do the remaining 3 containers. All right, let's mash down in the bag a little bit. Put our lid back on. And now this, we're going to let come down to room temperature. And by room temperature, I mean just that. Room temperature, not hot, not kind of sort of warm, but room temperature. Now that our mixture has come down to room temperature, I did that by simply letting it sit overnight. It's now time to transfer it into our carboy, amongst other things. With our freshly sanitized spoon, I'm going to go ahead and stop making so much noise. I'm going to just squeeze down on our bag just one more time. See if I can squeeze out any extra little goodness. That having been done, I'm going to go ahead and remove the bag. And using my freshly sanitized measuring cup and my freshly sanitized carboy and my freshly sanitized funnel, I am going to scoop up a little bit and using my freshly sanitized little bowl here, just pour a little bit into the bowl. And that's the bowl we're going to be using to bloom our yeast. The remainder goes in the jug. Now, of course, the easiest way of doing it would be just to simply pour this into the jug. All right, go ahead and bring this up closer to the top. By about so. There's still about maybe 2 cups of water left. We'll keep that on hand in case we need it. Remove our funnel. Put our cap back on for the moment. And let's do something with our yeast. Now I am using about half a teaspoon of our Red Star Premier Blanc wine yeast to do the blooming. Now, of course, if you don't have that, this still works. Go ahead and sprinkle that on in and around. And let's just go ahead and set that aside. Now, if you remember, we did juice half a lemon yes. And it's now time to go ahead and add that to our carboy. Lemon is simply acting as our acid blend substitute. Give it a little bit more acidity, as if it needed it, but careful not to get in any seeds. A strainer would be helpful, but that's all we need to do there. Let's put our cap back on tightly, because the next stage of the operation is that we want to incorporate our water and our lemon juice and our previous mixture such that it's mixed in pretty well. Just make sure you got a good grip on it. And I think that'll do it. Now, for those of you who have a hydrometer, it's now time to go ahead and take that first initial reading using our dedicated wine thief here. All right, looks like our initial reading is going to come in at, yep, our initial reading is coming in at 1.090. Let's go ahead and return our precious ginger mead to be back into the carboy. Put our cap back on. And we're just waiting for our yeast to show signs of life. Okay, now that our yeast is showing signs of life, we're going to go ahead and add this to our carboy. Now would be a good time to go ahead and install our airlock. Levels have been filled up to the appropriate mark. And I usually use a weakened mixture of star sand and water. Go ahead and take our cap off. Put our airlock on. And that should help prevent bugs and anything else from crawling in, and will allow CO2 to crawl out, and will allow CO2 to escape. It is now time to label our creation. We are making a ginger mead. And we started it on this date, and our original gravity, or starting gravity, was 1.090. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to put our wine someplace where it's relatively cool and dark. And we want to let that sit for the next several weeks. And as yeast begins to build up, we want to begin the process of racking. When the wine is all said and done, after several rackings, we want to go ahead and degas it if necessary, back sweeten probably for sure. Then the whole pasteurization, bottling, corking, capping, and all of that, which I have standalone videos for that you can check out in my winemaking operations playlist on my channel page. So, that being said, 12 months hence, we'll go ahead and crack one open and give it a try. So until then, if you like what you see here, click on that subscribe and notify buttons, become a member, become a Patreon supporter. And I'll see you in the next video. Okay, it's been a year. It's time to go ahead and crack this bottle open and see what ginger mead tastes like. A couple of things. One, let's see, born 8/1/2023. ABV came in at 12.34%. It's been back sweetened and, yes, it's been pasteurized. Although I should have let when I pasteurize wines and meads, the process is a little bit different. The reason why I use pasteurization after I back sweeten is basically to kill any remaining yeast that might still be in the wine that can become reactivated and begin re-fermentation because of all of the added sugar that's been added. Normally I would pasteurize in the bottles when I'm doing wines. When I'm doing meads, I like to pasteurize in the carboy. And when I pasteurize in the carboy, I like to let it sit, capped of course, after it's cooled down, for at least 2, 3, 4 days, so that any remaining sediment will settle at the bottom of the carboy, and I can simply rack off the top of that without getting it in the bottle, which is what didn't happen in this case, because I've got about a 1/4-inch layer of sediment, basically just honey solids that were used during the back sweetening process. And when I picked the bottle up and started swirling it around a little bit, this has now become, well, let's just say, it's I won't call it a mess. I mean, if I just put the bottle aside, grab another one, let this settle down, and all of this sediment, which you can probably not tell, but it's there, will settle to the bottom, and I will just consider that as basically lost opportunity to have that much more mead to drink. Or I could just swirl it up and just drink it as is. I mean, it's not harmful, it's just honey solids. But that being the case, I just want to say all that just to say all that. Let's go ahead and crack this open. All right. Apart from that, it went clear. It was bottled, God, I don't remember how long ago, because I made a batch of ginger wine at the same time. So I bottled them both at the same time. So it's been bottled about a good 2-ish, almost 3 months. It's got a nice pleasant aroma. Let's see. Let's go ahead and get right to it. Let's see. While I give it a moment to breathe. A couple of other notes. One, the 1-year waiting period between the starting of fermentation and me cracking open the bottle and doing this portion of the video, that's an arbitrary number. You can drink it whenever you think it's good and ready, after a couple of weeks or after 2 or 3 years. That's entirely up to you. I was doing videos where I was doing them every 6 months after fermentation started, but they just didn't quite taste right. I mean, they were okay, but they weren't quite done, in my opinion. So I switched to the 1-year format, which is what you're seeing here. Now, let's see. I know the ginger wine is a good hit. It's been a big hit with my family. Let's see if this will turn out as well. It's got just that very low level of ginger burn. If you've had strong ginger ale, that's pretty much what you've got here with a honey finish to it. Does have a little bit of burn though, which is not a bad thing. It's actually, I mean, it's ginger. It's going to have a little heat to it no matter what, whether you're drinking ginger ale or ginger wine, or in this case, ginger mead. I just had a bottle of ginger wine. It was about 3 days ago. Yeah, trying to save a couple for my family. The honey does give it a very nice finish. It's not overly prominent. It's very, very, very low in the background. You can taste it's there, but it's not a predominant characteristic. I would have to say, I'd have to say in order, the heat from the ginger, followed by the flavor of the ginger, followed by that smooth honey finish. Now again, I just use regular store-bought, and by store we're talking, let's just say, how can I say this without naming any names? A friend of mine likes to call them Wally World. You can extrapolate what I might mean from that, but basically it's their store brand. It's basically I won't say it's the cheapest stuff you can find, but it's basically their store brand, which is what I like to do when I'm doing. I'm going to edit most of that out, but note to self, when you're watching television and or watching a movie on television and you put it on pause, it might not stay on pause. It might just time out and start playing again. It happens. By the way, the movie was the original Matrix. I decided to crank that one up and watch that again for umpteenth time. I haven't seen it in a while. Kind of a big Keanu Reeves fan, especially with big on his John Wick series, which I've got them all downloaded or streamed. So yeah. That being said, again, back to the reason why we're watching this portion of the video. In a nutshell, I like it. 12.34% ABV. I don't really see any changes that I would make to the recipe for a simple recipe that this was. The only change I would make in the procedure would be to let it sit in the carboy for, after I pasteurize it, let it sit in the carboy for a little while longer so I don't get all this sediment floating around the bottom. But apart from that, that was it. Again, with all my videos, there are additional videos which describes the processes that occur after fermentation has been started. That end of the video, there's at least one racking that's transferring the wine from one carboy into another, leaving the least layer or the dead yeast layer behind. I'll do that at least once. You did not see the bottling process, the pasteurization process. You didn't see a number of other steps that I have standalone videos for, which you can find in my winemaking operations playlist on my channel page. But that having been said, set them aside. I will definitely set aside several of these bottles, where you only get 5 bottles out of a 1-gallon batch. This being number 1. The remaining 4 bottles I'll set aside. At least one of them I'll give to my son. Nope, daughter's got 2 more years before she can drink legally. But basically that's it. Would I make this again? Yeah. It's a very slight difference between the ginger wine and the ginger mead. Again, that honey finish is, again, to repeat, is pretty low down there. It's there, but it's not, once again, it's not the predominant factor. But it's not bad. It's not bad at all. But again, I like it. I like it a lot. This will definitely be on my to make again list of those wines that I've made throughout the years that basically are that enjoyable. Or when after the channel has been put to bed, I will definitely be making time and time again. And this is on that list. So until the how can I say it? Until the next video, I'll see you.